Week 0's in the bag, which means it's time for the offseason. That talk is over. Now it's time to talk USC versus LSU.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Culkin, and thanks for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you want to download your podcast, this show is always free, and this show will always appreciate your support. And if you are watching on YouTube, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button because you're not going to want to miss this show or any other shows coming up as we go on into the season. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, 100% playable offline. And did you know if you use promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all capitals, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program? Begin your coaching legacy today. All right. We're going to start the week off with a really good show. I've got the host of Locked On LSU. His name is Matt Moscona. He's also the host of After Further Review. It's heard weekdays from 3 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Alexandria, Lafayette, Lake Charles, all of the 5 boroughs. There you go. Matt, it's game week, man. Are you ready?
I'm fired up, Mark. You know what's interesting to me? I don't know if you feel the same way, but you spend the whole offseason talking about the season that's coming and you analyze everything. But then when you actually wake up and you realize, oh, there's a game this week, the anxiety starts to build because everything that you've talked about all season now all of a sudden is put to the test from a USC and LSU standpoint. Like, are the quarterbacks going to be able to replace the Heisman winners? Can the defenses actually get fixed? Like all that stuff. Well, guess what now? Like you're LSU, you're lining up against a Lincoln Riley offense in 6 days. Get ready. You know what I mean? It's that kind of feeling right now.
Bro, I got such a great taste on my mouth during week 0 watching Georgia Tech versus Florida State. You know, and whatever. I think everybody wants to see USC versus LSU. I mean, this thing has been in the making for 20 years. Going back when they split the national championship back in 2003.
So I'm curious if that is playing, if that angle is playing in Southern California this week, because here, Mark, look, you can still drive around Baton Rouge. This is not an exaggeration. You can still drive around Baton Rouge and see FUSC bumper stickers on the back glass of trucks. There's a lot of people who lived through that in 2003 where they're still like exposed nerve endings because the context is, man, LSU hadn't won a title in 45 years. And so finally you have your moment that so many LSU fans had waited for. So many lived and died and never got to see it. And now it's like, now someone was trying to steal your shine. So a lot of that resentment still lingers, man.
I know it does. And I know I gave you an anecdote before the show started. Let me tell you how much this game still means to a lot of UFC fans. I still remember this distinctly. USC at home versus Stanford, 41.5-point favorite. LSU's playing at home, and the final score got announced. And they showed a clip. I've seen clips of LSU Tiger Stadium. When that score was announced, I think the game actually stopped to celebrate USC finally losing a game.
I was there.
People on the field were hooping and hollering.
It was between the third and fourth quarters. LSU was playing Florida in 2007, which, Mark, that the LSU-Florida 2007 game is revered as one of the greatest in Tiger Stadium history. That was Tim Tebow, and it was a massive game. It was 28-24. As a matter of fact, like you know what? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you this real quick. I'm going to turn my camera.
Make it happen.
That right there on my wall is Jacob Hester scoring the game-winning touchdown from that game you're talking about. So now I'm sorry for the wobble on the camera, but to illustrate the point, like that was a massive, massive game. And yes, that moment, the eruption in the stadium in that moment was as loud as the eruption of a touchdown or anything like that. It was a moment anybody there would never forget. That is an absolute true story. If that story's still spreading around there in the lands of Troy, that's a very, very true story.
Look, USC at that time was considered the dominant program in college football. There's a lot of USC fans that can't stand the SEC because they feel they were behind the scenes working really hard to have those NCAA sanctions come crashing down to put the SEC back in their glory. So, I mean, it's there. It's really there. So I cannot wait for this game to happen. I mean, I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen this game into the 2003 teams play. It was obviously it was an ascending SC program where Pete Carroll, obviously Carson Palmer had won the Heisman the year before, and 03 with Leinart and Bush was sort of their beginning end. But man, that what would have been fascinating, Mark, is that LSU defense that year. You know, we all know Nick Saban now, right? Like we understand Nick Saban in the context of what his career is now that his career is over. But what he had built that year defensively was incredible. You know, the Oklahoma team that LSU beat to win the BCS championship that year, that Oklahoma team, well, you all remember very well, obviously lost their conference championship game and still got in because they're so far ahead. I mean, they scored 77 points at Texas A&M. And that was when A&M was still the wrecking crew. I mean, R.C. Slocum, the one thing he did well was defense. And that Oklahoma team could only manage 14 points against LSU. That defense was incredible. To see that LSU defense against that SC offense, I think is something that we all as college football fans kind of got robbed of.
I think a lot of college football got robbed imagine the playoffs in the mid 2000s. I mean, the chaos. You had really good teams. You had LSU, you had USC, you had Florida getting in there. You had Oklahoma, Texas. There would have been some epic games.
Think about 2004 Auburn, which went undefeated. Remember, of course, SC blew the doors off of Oklahoma, but Auburn didn't even get their chance. The point I've always made about the playoff, Mark, is the college football fans who worry and say, "Oh, the sacred college football regular season, like every game matters." I've argued the contrary. I think college football is the only sport in the history of mankind. Go back to like the ancient Romans when they used to wrestle naked in the Colosseum. You know what I mean? The only sport in the history of mankind where you could win every game you play and not even have a chance to win a championship. This solves that. Now, I'm not saying 04 Auburn would have beaten SC, but they deserve the chance to play it on the field, and they didn't get that opportunity.
Look, I have the same exact feeling USC 2008 when they got snubbed and Oklahoma and Florida played in that national championship game. You know, USC is getting they're getting their face rubbed in the dirt because they haven't played defense in a while. That 2008 team may be one of the greatest defenses ever. They gave up less than 10 points per game, and they're sitting on the sideline because Tim Tebow gave a teary-eyed speech after they lost at home to Mississippi State. The same weekend, USC lost on the road up at Oregon State, and guess which two teams ended the season with the exact same record? Mississippi State and Oregon State. So trust me.
You got the wrong Mississippi school. It was Ole Miss. It was Houston Nuts, Ole Miss Rebels that won in the swamp that day. We confused the Mississippi schools down here too. It's all good.
Yeah, to our point, that's how, every team has an argument like, I should have been there.
Yes,
absolutely.
Look, I mean, I'll throw another LSU team out at you. 2006 LSU. 2006 LSU was Jamarcus Russell and Dwayne Bowe and Buster Davis and LaRon Landry, and they blew the doors off of Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl that year. That's a team that, if they had gotten into that playoff, I mean, you just referenced, Florida. Florida won the national championship in 2006, beating Ohio State, blew them out. Well, LSU lost a really, really tough game in Gainesville. There was a controversial call around the goal line. Revisionist history here. But if LSU wins that game, LSU's playing Ohio State for the national championship and probably wins it. But those are the types of things that we could see in a playoff where, the one bad Saturday doesn't cost you everything. And you're also not beholden to whatever the computer said back in the day, or even just look at Florida State a year ago. I mean, God bless them. I understand what happened. Jordan Travis got hurt and all the players opted out in the bowl game, but they won every game they played. I mean, you got it. But playing it on the field has to mean something. The results of games have to matter. It can't just be the discretionary opinion of a bunch of people in a hotel ballroom in suburban Dallas. The result of the field has to matter, and this will allow that.
Yeah, look, I am not a fan of Florida State, but that made me upset. That upset me. There's no reason. You don't penalize the entire team because their quarterback got injured. He went 13-0, which I guess leads me to my last question of the segment. And we can tie it in. Do you like the conference championship game going forward? And do you also like these big out-of-conference games? Because I'm thinking now, you know what? If you're 10-2, you're in the playoffs if you play in the big conference or in the SEC. If you're 10-2 and you're going to the conference championship game and you happen to lose, is 9-3 getting you in?
No.
That's the thing.
I think it's so. First of all, I've had a lot of conversations about this. I don't think 10-2 is a lock because, and
No.
I've looked at the last decade, Mark, of the decade of the playoff era.
Okay.
And you would be stunned how many times double-digit win teams from power conferences have not been 11th or higher in those penultimate rankings that determine the playoffs. We're programmed in our brain to think, oh, you get to 10, you're going to be in. But history shows it's not the case. I mean, look, there was an Alabama team. The team when LSU won the championship with Joe Burrow in 2019, that Alabama team with Tua finished 10-2, and they were 13th in those penultimate rankings. So that team with Tua would have been outside looking in. An Alabama team at 10-2 would have been outside looking in. So I think a lot of it is going to go year to year. But to your question about the conference championship games, they're worthless. College football existed for 100 years without conference championship games. They're a money grab. It's nothing but a TV show. And until they figure out how to replace the revenue from those games, they're not gonna get rid of the game. I asked Greg Sankey that point blank. At SEC Media Days back in July, and he didn't have he gave you the whole look. We've had the conference championship game. It's been great exposure. I said, and they said, like, how are we going to crown a champion? I was like, well, you did it for 60 years without a conference championship game. You figured it out. So I don't think that's going to happen, Mark. I obviously think that those games are going to stay because there's too much money associated with them. But I would love to see, in the perfect scenario, a 10, 11, or 12 game regular season where every Power 4 team is only playing Power 4 teams.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
I think we're headed there eventually, Mark. I think it's an inevitability.
I write about this all the time. Eventually, this super conference realignment is going to turn into a 68, 64 team power conference with a commissioner. And here's your pool of teams you're scheduling from. And that's why I love strength of schedule. I'm just hoping that this new playoff committee, stays beholden to their values, and they really look at the schedule and reward teams, even if they lose. Where did they lose? Who did they lose to? Where it's not, oh, you know what? They got 10 wins and they play in the SEC. They got to be worth it. It's that type of thing.
Path of least resistance is what the committee has shown, though, at times. If you've got 2 losses and they got 1 loss, you're putting the team with 1 loss. We'll see if they actually do the right thing. But you and I are speaking the same language there.
There you go. Let's speak another language. Let me get this out of the way. All right. So, Locked On USC and LSU fans, I want to take a moment, give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game. I think you're going to love it. It's called Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's this really cool game that lets you step into the shoes of the head coach, lead your college. You could be the head coach of any program in the country. Imagine you're Brian Kelly. Imagine you're Lincoln Riley. You can do that with this game. From recruiting players, hiring coaching staffs, overseeing training camps, handing out scholarships. You control every crucial detail of your program. And here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the game. Yeah. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, it's going to shape the future and legacy of your program. And of course, we've got this really special offer for Locked On USC and Locked On LSU fans. If you use promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all capital letters, inside the game store, you're going to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of all these perks and get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit the ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, let's just get into this game now. We kind of talked on the surface about everything USC and LSU. I want to talk about LSU's advantages, at least the perceived advantages. Offensive line, we're going to start there.
Yeah.
Considered one of the best in the country. You got 2 NFL bookends, massive across the line, right? I think everyone knows that you have to control the trenches if you're going to win the game. I mean, Florida State fan right now, they're saying, They're doing this. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, both Matt and I were nodding up and down. So here's my question. LSU's got the perceived advantage on offensive line. Will the four guys who've been around, are they going to be able to cover up for the redshirt freshman that's starting at center, DJ Chester?
Yeah, that's a good question. And DJ Chester actually played a good bit last year as well. Okay. And he's good. Mark, Brian Kelly, I don't know if it's like this everywhere. I can only speak to my experience covering LSU, and this is my 18th season covering LSU. I covered Les Miles, Ed Ogeron, and now obviously Brian Kelly. The access he has given us is unprecedented. I mean, we get to go watch practice. We get to watch scrimmages. We get to watch hour and a half at a time. Like, he lets us in to see team periods. So it's not like a lot of places where maybe you get 15 minutes of stretch and then they kick you out. Right. I mean, he's given us some incredible access. So I don't really even have to tell you that I'm guessing based on what I've seen. DJ Chester's a really good player. I think in his time, he will be an NFL player. But the way you ask the question is right. Can the others cover up for him? You know, the two guards that LSU have are the unheralded ones. You mentioned, obviously, Will Campbell and Emory Jones. If you don't know their names, just go look up a mock draft, and they're both in there. They're the two offensive tackles. Dellinger is a 4-year starter, and Miles Frazier was a freshman All-American at FIU, transferred to LSU as he started the last 3 years now. Okay. So those dudes have played a ton of football. There's just nothing they haven't seen. So if you were telling me that it was a freshman tackle, I might be a little more apprehensive because you can get a lot of isolation situations where they might be exposed. But the fact that they're jam-packed right in the middle, and Chester's he's a big center too. I mean, I had the roster in front of me here a minute ago with the height.
5'3" or something like that.
He's not a typical squatty center. He's a big dude too. So, you know, that's if you want to start building a team, you want to start building the trenches. That's the way that Brian Kelly's always done it. And this offensive line, I think he said, is on par with the one he had in Notre Dame, where he had McGlinchey and those guys. Pumped out a couple of first rounders, and you can control the line of scrimmage. You know, you set your offense up for a lot of success. But yeah, man, I think this offensive line it's the best that LSU's ever had. I know that might seem hyperbolic, but it's legit. LSU hasn't had a first round pick on the offensive line since Alan Faneca in 1998. They're going to have 2 this year. So this is the best line they've ever had.
That stat alone just blew me away. I had no idea it's been that long. Wow.
Yeah. The state produces a ton of skill talent. You get running backs and receivers and cornerbacks, and what you don't see a lot of is athletic offensive line, because they all play defensive line, and you haven't historically seen a lot of quarterbacks, but that's kind of changing a little bit now too.
Now tell me, is USC going to learn more about LSU's offensive line as far as, are they better at pass protecting or run blocking? Because last year your best rusher was Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
So how's that going to work out this year?
Yeah, and so it's going to be fascinating because it's obviously going to look different, right? I mean, Jaden Daniels ran for 1,100 yards and averaged 8 yards a carry, which is absurd. You know, but a lot of what they did with Jaden wasn't necessarily just Jaden improvising. They were designed plays for him. They obviously have that with Garrett Nussmeier. I interviewed Nussmeier at SEC Media Days, and I asked, talked about learning behind Jaden, and he said, yeah, it was so great to be able to learn, I learned so much from him. I said, did he teach you how to run for 1,100 yards? He kind of laughed. No, I mean, of course it's fundamentally going to look different. But, last year, the lead rusher among running backs was a guy named Logan Diggs. He's a kid from Louisiana who started his career at Notre Dame. Y'all probably saw him when Notre Dame played SC. So Diggs was LSU's leading rusher, averaged more than 5 yards a carry. And he was a very good SEC back, but he tore his ACL in the bowl game and then transferred to Ole Miss. So LSU's only got 4 scholarship running backs. And if you're looking at one question, like literally just one question on the offense, and it's the only one, it's at running back, because they've got limited numbers, and the most carries any of LSU's running backs have had in a season, I believe Josh Williams maybe had 75 rushes a couple of years ago. But so whoever becomes the bell cow, and I think it's going to be Josh Williams, will be doing it for the first time in their career.
Interesting. Okay. There are so many similarities between this team. By the way, USC also only has 4 scholarship running backs. One of them being the starter who just transferred over from Mississippi State, Woody Morris. So some familiarity there. As far as where's LSU's biggest advantage on defense, not named Harold Perkins?
That's so So that's the $1 million question. You keep saying like they're mirror images, Mark. I've said the same thing. Like if you were to take a write-up of LSU and a write-up of SC, and you redact the names, the players, the coaches' names, you would feel like you're reading like I could be reading an SC write-up and think I'm reading about LSU. Right. I mean, down to the fact that both Garrett Nussmeier and Miller Moss are both 6'2", 200 pounds, signed in the class of 2021 as 4-stars, sat behind Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks, started for the first time in the bowl game, threw for over 300 yards in the bowl game. I mean, it's eerie. It's eerie how similar they are.
I see dead people eerie type of
right.
stuff.
It's so it's very hard to predict this game. You asked where LSU's advantage is. I don't know that they have one defensively, but here's what I'll tell you. I mentioned we got to go watch a lot of practice.
Sure.
When LSU would go individual periods, so like if the corners lined up against the receivers in one-on-one drills, or if the offensive defensive line were doing pass rush drills, the LSU offense embarrassed the defense consistently because there's no cornerback that LSU has that's as good as Kyron Lacey as a receiver. There's no defensive lineman LSU has that's as good as Will Campbell. So when we'd see these one-on-ones, it was overwhelming for the offense. But they'd go into these team periods, and the defense would get wins, and they'd force turnovers, and they'd get sacks, and they'd get safeties, and they'd get stops. And it was like, my thesis on this defense is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Harold, you mentioned Perkins. He's great. He's going to be awesome. Everybody knows his name. I think they're good at defensive end, not just good by comparison. I think they're good. They got a lot of veteran dudes at defensive tackle, Mark, like dudes that are 5th and 6th year guys with 22, 23-year-old guys, but you don't know any of their names. They brought in a transfer at safety from A&M who's a legitimate SEC caliber safety. But, man, you're not going to hear a lot of these names called in the draft in the spring, man. If they do it, if this defense turns around, it's going to be a collective effort. It's not going to be because nobody can block Arden Key coming off the edge. You know, it's not because they got Derek Stingley out wide locking down your best receiver, because that doesn't happen on this team this year.
That's interesting. That might be a perfect segue into our next segment, because I think, I know LSU is known for their wide receivers, but I think one of USC's biggest advantages might be their core of wide receivers and their secondary. We're going to talk about that in the next segment. Mondays are rough enough, but it gets rougher after lunch. You tired after lunch, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let 5-Hour Energy Shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. Did you know that 5-Hour Energy has 0 sugar? Yeah, and it comes in a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to their website. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore, like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or a 24-pack. Yeah, you choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your front door. All you have to do is go to 5hourenergy.com. That is the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today. And if you use my promo code LOCKEDONUSC, you'll get to receive 20% off your order. You can also use Locked On LSU, and you'll get that same 20% off your order. Use your energy now. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders either. Go to 5hourenergy.com today and order yours. All right. Time to talk about USC's advantages, perceived advantages.
I got my first question.
Go for it, man.
All right. I am fascinated because I think the same thing that USC thinks is like, all right, is the defense any better? Okay. I think you feel good about the offense. How good should you feel about SC's offense because of Lincoln Riley? Meaning you have a proven elite play caller, and I think we all just assume it's gonna click. Am I right in assuming that because Riley is the one as the puppet master, that this offense is just going to keep going?
Yes, we're going to assume that, because since Lincoln Riley has been involved in calling plays, I think he's had his offenses have been top 8 in scoring percentage in the country. I mean, they average 40 points per game. It doesn't matter who steps in a quarterback. It just continues to happen. So until we see the trend shift, I mean, when Miller Moss played in the Holiday Bowl, kind of like when Garrett Nussmeier stepped on the field, it just looked like Miller Moss was the Heisman in waiting.
Yeah.
I mean, 6 touchdowns, 370 yards, and he's doing it with wide receivers that were true freshmen. Plus, he still had Taj Washington out there. But for the most part, he was spreading the ball around. I think USC had 10 or 11 different receivers in that game. That's the difference between Miller Moss and Caleb Williams. Miller Moss is going to be more of a game manager. He's going to use the tools around him. I think you're going to see a USC offense that looks more like what Pete Carroll used to do. When you had Matt Leinart a quarterback per se. Matt Leinart wasn't, he won the Heisman, but he wasn't any type of athletic freak. He wasn't a Jaden Daniels. He wasn't a Caleb Williams. What did he do? He used all the tools, all the skill around him.
He had lots of it too.
And he had a lot of it. I mean, when you got guys like Reggie Bush and Lendale White, it helps. Man. It helps, right? So I think that's what they're going to do. And in the offseason, Lincoln Riley made a big concerted effort. We'll talk about the defense in a second. But the first thing they wanted to do was get bigger and stronger. So from this, it started after the bowl game, but it really took effect from spring up until fall camp. The team gained another 1,400 pounds.
Collectively?
Collectively, yes.
Yeah. I don't think one guy gained 1,400 pounds.
No, if they did, that would be a problem.
That would be a record, Mark.
Yeah. But it was really significant in USC's in the trenches for USC. That's where they needed to get bigger and stronger. And we're talking about the offensive line right now. I think we're going to see Lincoln Riley go back to his play calling days from Oklahoma, more power running. And he got away from that a little bit. And some of it had to do with the roster, the personnel on the roster. USC is going to they're starting to look more like those old USC teams. Instead of hearing Urban Meyer talk about, they don't look like USC. When other coaches say that doesn't look like USC, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
So, Lincoln Riley came in, he hit the transfer portal hard.
You mentioned Woody Marks. A lot of people here know him. He's a really good back. I just assume SC is going to move the ball and is going to score. I mean, the same way that I think you asked me, where are the perceived advantages on LSU's defense? I'm more interested, or on LSU, I'm more interested for USC's defense is to say, what is it going to look like with Antonlynn? Do we know that yet? Stylistically, what he wants to do?
So
Ryan Kelly said, they don't know that and all the transfers. They're just looking at UCLA film.
And that's a great film to watch, because if you watch that film, you're going to see a really, really good defense. And I am praying. I mean, if I could, I'd get down on my knees right now. I am praying that Antonlynn can have the same effect on USC's roster that he had with UCLA's roster. UCLA, the year before, had a really bad defense. USC bad. Last year, UCLA had the number 2 run defense in the country, top 11 overall defense in the country. USC doesn't need to do that because of their offensive potential. If USC has a top 30 to a top 50 defense, they're in a good place at the end of the year. Because last year they were scoring 41 points a game, but they're losing.
It's so funny,
man.
The
math doesn't add up.
Mark, LSU lost a game at Ole Miss last year where they scored 49 points. They lost 55-49. They were up 9 points with 8 minutes to go and lost the game, up 2 scores. It's so funny that the conversations are so similar. What about the transfers with USC's defense? Because if I'm correct, and tell me if I'm wrong, it looks like when I look at the depth chart, 10 of the 11 starters or projected starters are transfers, and maybe 5 or 6 are first-year guys at SC. So is there a question or concern about continuity defensively, especially at the start of the season?
I don't think there is going to be. And let me tell you why. The strength of USC's defense is going to be the secondary. A lot of people assume you're going to have 2 new starting cornerbacks. DeCarlos Nicholson, who came over from Mississippi State, who, by the way, I think has the longest arms I've ever seen in my life. The ball could be 5 yards over his head, and he's not out of the play.
Yeah.
You brought over John Humphrey, a very physical cornerback from UCLA. You brought in two safeties, Achille Arnold from Oregon State, all Pac-12 first team, Kamari Russell starting safety at UCLA. Well, so far during fall camp, arguably USC's best cornerbacks have been Jalen Smith, who started at nickel. He was the Holiday Bowl MVP, and Jacoby Covington, who had transferred to USC 2 years ago. So we're not sure who's going to be starting in the secondary. I have a really strong feeling Achille Arnold and Kamari Ramsey will be your starting safeties, but at cornerback, they're deep. I mean, Doug Belk literally said, we are going to play 8 to 10 defensive backs per game. And he wasn't talking about getting in some special teams action. He meant in the rotation. That's a tall ask. I don't know how he's going to do that, but that's what he plans to do. Up front is where the issue is. Everybody knows the name Bear Alexander. They've got Jamil Muhammad at one rush end. They've got a bunch of guys that they're working inside with there. You got the transfer from Wyoming, Gavin Meyer. You got Elijah Hughes. And then Anthony Lucas is the wild card, the X factor. Came over from Texas A&M, 5-star. He, by all accounts, has finally developed. He's ready to play. This is the takeaway I've had from practice. When I go, we get to interview the players, the coaches. We get to see a little bit. We saw a scrimmage that they had a week ago on Saturday. We were told we were given a gag order. Don't talk about it. What I saw Georgia Tech's new defensive coordinator do with Georgia Tech. If USC shows up with that kind of energy, that game on Sunday between USC and LSU, it's going to be epic. It's going to come down to a field goal. I cannot wait.
That was going to be my last question. If it comes down to a field goal, let's say LSU's got a 1-point lead, 3 seconds on the clock. SC is lining up for a 46-yarder from the left hash. How confident are you that it's good?
Well, interesting. So our field goal kicker last year, Dennis Lynch, I'm trying to be nice, but he was terrible with the chippies.
Okay.
But put him long distance, he was perfect.
Okay.
I could kick 50-yarders with his eyes closed. This year, Lincoln Riley went and he stole the scholarship kicker away from Georgia Southern, Michael Lance. So I don't know who's going to be actually doing the kicker. I think Michael Lance is going to have the job. You don't go take a scholarship kicker from someone else if you don't plan on using him.
Sure.
Otherwise, to me, it's a waste of a roster spot. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Again, because both teams are coming off of last year not knowing what to do on defense, there's going to be some growing pains. I anticipate some mistakes. Whoever makes the least amount of mistakes and whoever can get the most stops on defense, I think, has the advantage.
Yeah, I agree. I'll tell you one quick note for your listeners and viewers. LSU's place kicker Damian Ramos is in his 3rd year at LSU. 3rd year as the starting kicker. He's very good, very consistent, very solid. Special teams the last 2 years under Brian Kelly have been a real challenge. Efficiency ratings in the triple digits, and that's surprising because LSU historically has been really good on special teams. We'll see if they ironed it out. They still haven't figured out punter yet. They brought in a transfer from Louisiana Tech who was all conference last year. But, Mark, I'm telling you, we watch these guys. They'll boom a 60-yarder, then one's a 90-degree angle. It's like what? So the consistency has been a challenge. And if LSU's punters, if you file this away, you may see a shank, a low liner, where an SC returner can catch it on the run coming up and actually flip a field or maybe take one to the house. Like that is a component in this ball game that you do not get up and go to the bathroom when LSU's punting, because there could very well be a significant game-changing play when LSU is punting on Sunday.
Look, I know USC fans and LSU fans alike to consider their programs as wide receiver U. LSU has a long tradition, a long history. Same with USC. USC has 4 young wide receivers. One of them, his name is Zachariah Branch. You're talking about special teams. Zachariah Branch was a freshman All-American. He won the Jet Award for returning a kick, returning a punt, as well as a touchdown receiving. The dude can do everything. He's an all-purpose back. So, yeah, he could be, like you said, don't go to the bathroom if LSU is punting, because he's going to be back there on both punt return and kickoff. This is, again, I I know LSU likes their wide receivers. I know LSU was a little concerned about their secondary, and this is why I think what USC is bringing to the table on the outside, that's where the chess match is going to be, because LSU's got that offensive line. I think they're going to lean in their run game. They're going to use their tight ends. What is Lincoln Riley going to do? How is he going to attack? Is he going to be able to keep his ego in check and use that run game, use that big offensive line that he developed, or is he going to try and take advantage of the perceived weakness on LSU's defense on the outside?
Ain't no perceived weakness, man. LSU's got weaknesses all over the place. They just got to make sure they don't allow a 16-yard reception to become a 60-yard house call, which was all too common a year ago.
You're preaching to the choir right now.
I know, man. We like I said, this is a good way to bring it full circle. We could go back and redo this episode and just redact the names, and you would think we're talking to your listeners would have no idea that I was talking about LSU, and vice versa. It's going to be a fascinating matchup Sunday in Vegas. I'm looking forward to being there.
Absolutely, and I you know what, we're going to do this again. Hopefully after the game, we're gonna commiserate. One of us is going to say, here's some tissue. The other one's going to be sitting there with a big smile like Matt has right now. So I look forward to it. I'm looking forward to this game as well. Matt, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I've been looking forward to it. Again, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, I always tell people, Mark, if you can spell my name, you can find me on the internet. My handle's everywhere at Matt Moscona. I'm on YouTube, where we stream live audio and video, my radio show every day, and of course every day here on Locked On LSU. So if you hit me up on Twitter or Instagram or anywhere, I'm TikTok, I'm there. A lot of vowels, man. You can spell my name, you can find me. There
you go. And you know me, I'm here 5 times a week, Locked On USC. When you can't find me here, when you're done making Locked On USC your first listen in, you'll venture on over to Locked On LSU to check out what's going on with USC's next opponent. Don't forget, head on over to wersc.com. We've got the subscription special going. Take advantage of it. So until that next episode, everyone, you know what to do.